Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Nate. I also go by Hockey Boy Nate, and today we are finally at day one of the major severe weather outbreak that's going to be impacting the United States. That will also continue into tomorrow. So if you guys are new to my channel, please be sure to like the video, subscribe if you are new, turn on notifications so that you are up to date with everything that I'm going to do. That it does include me live streaming tonight. So if you want to see live severe weather analysis, please be sure to tune into my live stream. I don't exactly know when I'm going to put it up, but please be sure to tune into that later on tonight. Follow me on social media. Also join my Discord server. There was a couple tornado warnings in Canada yesterday that I talked about on my Twitter, so follow me on Twitter. I provide all sorts of updates on there as well. I also have timestamps on this video so that people may pick and choose as to what they may want to see. I'm going to be talking about 2 days. I'm going to be talking about day one of the severe weather outbreak, which is here in front of you on this screen. And then I'm going to be talking about day two, which is on Thursday, May 27th. Massive enhanced risk here with a little hidden gem of tornadoes, even some embedded tornadoes within the line afterwards. So if you live in these areas, highly advise you all to watch those parts of your videos, specifically the people in the dark green, the yellows, and especially the oranges and reds. Speaking of oranges and reds, we have our day one outlook here. This massive area of severe weather that covers two parts of the United States. One is in the Northeast, the other is in the central to high plains. And so we have our dark green here, which is a 1 out of 5 on the severe weather scale, or a marginal risk. We have our slight risk here, which is a 2 out of 5 indicated in this yellow. We have a 3 out of 5 on the orange, which is our enhanced risk. And then we have our 4 out of 5 right here in this red, or a moderate risk for severe weather. That is some pretty strong severe weather that could be happening in southern Nebraska and northern Kansas. So if you live in any of these areas here, whether you're the central, southern, or even high plains, or if you're in the Northeast, highly advise that you all watch out. The potential for some severe weather is possible within your area. Speaking of potential, let's take a look at the probabilities for each parameter. We'll take a look at our hail outlook here first. We have our 5%, which is indicated in this brown, 15, which is indicated in this yellow here. We have our 30%, which is indicated in this red, and then we have a 45%, which is indicated in that pink. So whatever probability you have, that is your chance of seeing 1-inch size hail or larger within 25 miles of a point. Then we also have this little hatch risk, and you see this this little black circle with the dotted lines in it. That right there is a significant risk for severe weather, or your hatched risk. That is where you can have a 10% chance or greater probability of seeing 2-inch size hail or larger. So definitely some very extreme conditions from a hail perspective here. You do not want to mess with 2-inch size hail. That could easily bust windshields, could dent cars, and could easily break valuables outdoors, even hurt people and pets. So definitely one of those things where if you have valuables that are outside, I highly advise them being put under some sort of cover or shelter. That way they may be protected at all costs. Now, if we take a look at the wind outlook, a much larger 15% for wind rather than hail here in the Northeast. That's more or less what's going to be happening here. A massive wind risk that'll be pushing on through here in the Northeast. Might get amplified here once you get towards the New England vicinity, especially with how the Hudson River can basically channel a lot of moisture. With the moisture return, basically create a lot of southerly flow, which southerly flow is just basically stuff coming from the south. And so you could see some amplification of storms within that general vicinity. You also have your massive risk here. As I said, 5 is brown, 15 is yellow, 30 is red, and 45% is in pink. So whatever probability you have, that is your chance of seeing 58-mile-per-hour winds or above within a 25-mile radius. You also have this little hatch risk here, which is inside the 30 and the 45% risk. And so if it was, significant hail, if that's what that mean there for hail, then this only means one thing: significant wind. And so what you guys could see is up to hurricane force winds that are possible, a 10% chance or greater of seeing 74-mile-per-hour winds or greater within a 25-mile radius. So definitely something to where if you live within that area, you have to be very mindful as to these storms moving on through. We also have our tornado risk, and a very large tornado risk at that. You have a massive 2% tor risk here, or tornado risk within the Northeast. The 2% is indicated in this little green blob. The 5% is indicated in the brown, and then in yellow is your 10% here instead of it being 15. So you have a 10% chance here for tornadoes across Nebraska, extreme northwestern or northeastern parts of Colorado, as well as northwestern parts of Kansas. But massive 2% tornado risk here for the Northeast. That could even go into extreme eastern parts of Ontario, like Ottawa, as well as places like Montreal and Quebec, specifically central to southern parts of the province of Quebec, maybe even to Newfoundland, but we'll have to see. But definitely something there that we're going to have to be mindful of as this continues to move on through. As I said, I most likely will be live streaming this both in the US and in Canada. So if you guys want to stay up to date with that, as I said, tune into my live stream later on tonight. Turn on notifications so that you guys may be up to date as to when I'm going live. And of course, the Storm Prediction Center updated while I was recording my video. And so we still have a moderate risk for severe weather. We still have 45% chance for hail here with some significant hail across the board. We still have a 45% chance for some severe winds. But we also have now a 15% chance for tornadoes, as well as a significant risk. And so we have our 2%, which is indicated in green right here. We have our 5%, which is indicated in brown, our 10%, which is indicated in yellow, and 15%, which is indicated in red. So whatever probability you have, that is your chance of seeing tornadoes within a 25-mile radius. And then you also have this significant risk right here, which could indicate a 10% chance or greater of seeing tornadoes of EF2 strength or above. So that is basically 111 mile per hour winds of tornadoes and greater than that. So just something to note here as you watch on through later on in the video. All right, let's take a look at the simulated reflectivity. We're going to be using the HRRR for the Central Plains here. If you guys want to pay attention to the timings and all, look at the top right part of your screen. You'll be able to see everything that you need throughout the entire part of the video. And so as we take a look here for the simulated reflectivity, nothing really is going on here in midday towards the noon hours. Even you have a couple showers here in the Ohio River Valley into the northern deep south. You also have a couple showers and thunderstorms here in the northern parts of the Rockies in the U.S. But then stuff really starts to kick off here towards the late afternoon into early evening hours. You got showers and thunderstorms that start to head towards Rapid City, even north of Denver, and that'll continue to congeal, and even more storms will form further south towards Goodland in Kansas, and that'll be moving on through, as well as some showers here near Amarillo that could really start to fire off. And then you even have some more storms that form near Dodge City, and now you have this giant, consolidated line here from Kansas all the way up into South Dakota. More or less, Nebraska and Kansas are going to see the biggest threat for some storms. So if you are in any parts of Kansas, more or less, you guys could potentially get some activity within your general vicinity. Honestly, with the tornado risk that I was talking about earlier, they honestly could add a significant risk for tornadoes. Even into the overnight hours, there could be the potential for a 10% significant chance for tornadoes, especially with how the supercells are forming in the beginning of the event, as well as how it progresses overnight with the environment that it's in. And we'll talk about that environment here in a second. But yeah, these storms continue to form on through, move into the evening hours, all the way into the overnight hours. And places like Topeka, Lawrence, and Kansas City could start to see some of these storms from midnight and onwards, and how it starts to knock on your door all the way into the early morning hours tomorrow. So if you guys live over there, highly advise having a weather radio to keep you guys up to date as this continues to progress over on overnight. But if you don't, turn on emergency alert system on your phone. That would probably be a safe bet. Moisture in the atmosphere, and so typically you want dew points around 60 degrees or above. That is conducive for severe weather And that is indicated right in here with these yellows and oranges. The yellows actually indicate 60s. The oranges start to indicate upper 60s into 70s. You can even see these 70 numbers here indicate some very high dew points, very strong moisture that is being plummeted into this general area for severe weather. Your CAPE, or convective available potential energy, this is the measure of warm air rising and cold air sinking into the atmosphere. The displacement between the two indicates how much energy there is for thunderstorms to either form or sustain. And so typically, if you have above 2,000 joules per kilogram CAPE, you tend to have severe storms. And the 2,000 joules per kilogram is indicated within these yellows right within here. And so there's actually some areas that have reds, purples, even whites if you squint hard enough. But some of these areas have a plethora amount of energy, some in upwards of 3,000 to even 4,000 joules per kilogram CAPE. That is definitely enough for some severe weather to be moving on through this general vicinity. Now, if we take a look at our wind shear here, we're going to be taking a look at our 850 millibar winds, or our 1 kilometer above ground level winds here. You can see that we have a lot of winds coming from the south. And this is important because if we take a look at how supercells really form that could be tornadic, the wind has to veer with height. So as you go higher and higher up in the atmosphere, the winds have to change directions in a specific way. So we have winds here at 1 kilometer above ground level that are coming from the south that are pretty strong and upwards of 20 to even 30 knots in some spots. And so some decent wind shear there. And then if we take a look at winds higher up into the atmosphere, our 700 millibar wind shear, or our 3 kilometer above ground level wind shear, you can see our winds do change direction. The winds are now coming from the south and west. So we do have some slight veering here within this general vicinity, and this does indicate the threat for some supercells to become tornadic. But some large hail damaging winds and tornadoes are possible just by looking at the setup. All right, now we're going to take a look at everyone's favorite thing, and this is the soundings. Now, for most of you who are new to my channel, you guys may look at this and say, Nate, I was just here for the weather content. You don't have to show me squiggly lines. Like, it looks like you doodled here. Let's be honest here. You got some dotted lines. You got some cool colors. You got some, lines that changed colors, all sorts of stuff. What are you doing? Well, this right here, I guarantee you, is not me just doodling. It actually is a sample of the environment here within a specific spot. So I took this sample of the environment here in western Kansas. And we're going to break down the sounding spot by spot so that you guys may be able to understand what I'm looking at. But first things first, we're going to be taking a look at this box right here. And this is your hodograph. Now this shows you your wind veering with height. And this is important because this actually can show you if things could be tornadic. This shows you a general spin in the atmosphere, with just, say, a weather balloon. So let's say you had a weather balloon and you had a radar to track it, and your radar was right here at this red dot that I just put down. This line right here would represent the track that it would take as the weather balloon goes up with height. May not be the exact track, but, it's close enough here, more or less, to where it measures the direction of where the winds are actually going. So you can see how the weather balloon starts to head north, and then it heads to the north and east, and now it heads east, and now it's going almost due east from the original origin. So this general curling to the right in the atmosphere is conducive for tornadoes, specifically from the 0 to 3 kilometer range, or this red line right here. We want to look for the general curling to the right in the atmosphere with the red line here. And so that does tell me that this is a tornadic hodograph here, which tells us that there could be, from a wind shear perspective, something tornadic there in western Kansas. Now, if we take a look at this over here, this is called a skew-T diagram. And more squiggly lines. I know, fun, right? But here, this actually tells you your thermodynamics in the atmosphere, or basically your moisture, your energy, and your temperature within spots of the atmosphere. So your green line right here, these are your dew points. Your red line right here, that is your temperature line. And this dotted line right here is a developing parcel line, or the pathway in which a thunderstorm has to take when it develops in order to get to maturity. And so a good way for us to be able as to within what specific heights it is and what temperature it is, or stuff like that. There are these red numbers over to the side that indicate how high it is. So 1 kilometer, 3 kilometers, 6 kilometers, stuff like that as it moves on through. And so that's pretty useful to help out as to how high this is and what the temperatures are. And speaking of temperatures, these numbers down here, the 50 all the way down to -40, these are your temperatures in Celsius. So the only number you really have to watch out for, really, that makes sense, is this this blue dotted line that goes up here. It's not an exact dotted line or red line that I drew, but it's along that dotted line if you look hard enough. 0 degrees Celsius equals to 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's just a good indicator right there for you all who may want to know what the temperature is at a specific height. Now, anywhere in between the red line and the dotted line, if the red line's on the left-hand side and the dotted line's on the right-hand side, anywhere in the middle is known as convective available potential energy, or your CAPE. And so there is a lot of CAPE here. Actually, CAPE numbers are in upwards of 5,000 joules per kilogram. So you have a lot of energy here in western Kansas. And this does tell me that this could get pretty significant for hail, but you definitely have the threat for tornadoes as well because of that hodograph from the wind shear perspective. All right, now if we take our knowledge and we move it over to central Kansas, well, northern or central Kansas, as well as northern, or not northern, central to southern parts of Nebraska. Holy crap. Just by me looking at the top here, it kind of threw me for a whirl because it said S and then NE, and then NE typically stands for Northeast. And so, yeah, that kind of threw me for a loop there. But, yeah, looking at this hodograph with the red does turn to the right. It actually veers completely to where it makes like a semicircle. So this actually tells me that this could be a bit more of a cyclic type event to where you can have tornadoes that form not relatively quickly, but they could form and then deteriorate and then they form again, and it would just be this constant cyclic motion to where you'd have tornadoes and then they die out, and then there would be new ones that form rather quickly, and they just continue to go over and over and over again all the way throughout, compared to what the hodograph was before, which favored a bit more of a long track motion to it. So definitely something to keep in mind with all of that. But this does curl off to the right, so this is a tornadic hodograph. This does check out in my opinion. If we take a look at the thermodynamics, you do have a plethora amount of CAPE here. Your LCL is kind of high here. This is just your low condensation level, which tells you how high the clouds are. And so if you can get it below 1 kilometer, or even below 0.5 kilometers, if you can get it below 0.5 kilometers, you have a pretty good chance of getting tornadoes if you have wind shear and CAPE and stuff like that. Because if you think of it this way, the low condensation level basically tells you how high up the clouds are basically going to be. So the closer to the ground the clouds are, the less distance the tornado or the vortex that forms the tornado has to travel to the ground. And so if you can get your LCL to get closer and closer to the ground, then you'll be able to get your tornadoes that'll form off of it. But you can still have tornadoes that form off of a high LCL. It just won't be all too likely due to the distance it has to travel to get to the ground. But you have some pretty good CAPE here, and upwards of 3,000 joules per kilogram almost. And so this is definitely a good sounding here for some tornadic potential. There is a little bit of a limiting factor in the atmosphere, but in my opinion, it won't really be that much of a factor here with this event today. And final sounding here, this is for northeastern Kansas during the overnight event. This is when it starts to head into the Topeka and Lawrence vicinity. And so you do have that hodograph that curls off to the right. And so that is something that checks off maybe a little bit of a long track mesocyclone motion, more or less. You do have a little bit of crosswise vorticity here from 2 to 3 kilometers, which basically is just winds moving towards the end origin of storm motion for people who may know what weather is about. I won't get into the time as to how to dissect photographs completely for people who may be new. I may do that in the future, but um, for the people who do know stuff about weather, you have some crosswise vorticity here at 2 to 3 kilometers. And so maybe a little bit of some long track characteristics based off of how it's not a full semicircle. It's kind of like more of a right angle type photograph, but you still have something there that indicates tornadic potential. And so that does check off. If you take a look at the thermodynamic perspective of this, you have Cape, so that checks out. A lot more of a limiting factor, but this is going to be a lot more of a straight line wind event here, more or less. So if you can get embedded mesocyclones within the actual line of storms that move on through into Kansas, then you might get the chance for tornadoes as it moves on through. So you could have the threat for some embedded tornadoes within the line as it moves overnight, and that's all really we have to watch out for, more or less, from a tornadic perspective. Now, if we take a look at the Northeast, we're going to move on over here. The HRRR is what we're going to use for this event here as well. And we have some pretty widespread storms. Now, as I said, if you want to pay attention to timestamps, top right-hand corner is the best for you, as well as timings and stuff like that. You already have a plethora amount of storms that form here in Ontario and Quebec, as well as the Great Lakes vicinity. And so that'll continue to translate more into the Northeast. You can see how this actually becomes a lot more consolidated in places near Ottawa, Montreal. Even Quebec starts to become under the gun at around 2:30 to even 3 o'clock. More storms begin to form near Syracuse as well, maybe even further down south towards Binghamton. And then the leftover showers from the Great Lakes actually start to move on through here into Pittsburgh at around 4. And you got a lot of storms that really start to fire off here near Utica. And this is when stuff really starts to kind of consolidate more or less for the United States to where it starts to become an overnight threat. You might even get some lingering showers here across the board, and your chances for tornadoes is possible as this continues to unfold towards the overnight hours. But the good news is that by midnight, more or less, or past midnight, that's when these storms are supposed to kind of die out or move out to sea. And so that's the one good thing that you have over the Central Plains, is that your activity starts to deteriorate as it moves through towards the midnight hours. Dew points here, I was talking earlier about how the dew points, if you're in the 60s or above, that is favorable for severe weather. There is a widespread scale for some 60s. There is some that are below 60, but that shouldn't really make too much of a difference all too much, in my honest opinion. It just means lower amounts of energy, and that some areas that do have higher energy will just basically amplify the storms and move on through, even through areas that don't have as much. But you do have a plethora amount of moisture here, and so some severe weather is possible from a moisture perspective. Your convective available potential energy, lot less Cape here. There's barely any areas of yellows that indicate 2,000 joules per kilogram, but with the Northeast, if you have some strong shear, you don't really need a whole lot of energy to form off of it. You just need some really strong wind shear with decent amounts of energy and upwards of 1,200 joules per kilogram, and you'll be able to get going really quickly. And we have a plethora amount of energy here. This is later on in the day, so there's a bit higher amounts of Cape here across portions of the Northeast, but most of these areas would have been green here, and we could have had some areas that could have produced some pretty strong amounts of damaging winds, and maybe even the localized threat for tornadoes, especially here in New England. Definitely could foresee that happening later on tonight, as well as further on through into Quebec. Definitely could see the chance for tornadoes. I did, in my Discord server, I did cover a tornado warning in extreme western parts of Quebec and south central parts of Ontario, and that actually produced a tornado. That was pretty interesting too. So I do cover Canadian events if I need to, which I most likely will tonight. So if you know anyone who lives up there in Quebec and in Ontario, feel free to send my channel to their way. I'll be able to get some good analysis there for them. Now, let's take a look at it from a wind shear perspective, and you can see a lot of the wind shear here coming from the west. So we have a lot of westerlies here, a lot of westerly winds from the 850 millibar vicinity, or 1 kilometer above ground level winds. And so a lot of westerlies here with this setup, And then if we take a look at our 700 millibar winds, we have some decent veering here, but it's not exactly the best veering. It's just more or less some more westerlies. And so this could indicate a strong gusty wind threat for the most part, but I can't rule out some embedded rotations within the line with all of this. All right, speaking of embedded rotations, we're going to talk about the day that probably will most likely have that, and that is day 2, our Thursday, May 27th outlook here. A massive risk for severe weather across portions of the Ozarks into the Central Plains. So from Illinois down to Missouri, down into extreme northwestern parts of Arkansas, as well as southeastern parts of Kansas, much of Oklahoma, except for the western portions, as well as a little bit of the northern panhandle around Childress. So if you live over there, highly advise you guys watch out for some severe weather. As I said, you have a 3 out of 5 on the severe weather scale here in orange, 2 out of 5 in the yellow, 1 out of 5 in the dark green, and then a 0 out of 5 in these in this kind of light green. But it just means that you're going to get some thunderstorms that moves on through. Can't rule out the chance for some severe weather, but it's just very small, very, very small. Now, if we take a look at the parameters here, we're going to take a look at the hail outlook, which indicates that you have a 5% indicated in brown, a 15% indicated in yellow, and a 30% indicated in red. So whatever probability you have, that is your chance of seeing 1-inch size hail or larger within 25 miles of a point. You also have this black circle with dotted lines in the middle. That is your hatched risk, which indicates that there is a 10% chance or greater probability of seeing 2-inch size hail or larger within 25 miles of a point. So definitely something to watch out for as that continues to move on through as well. You also have your wind outlook here, a lot larger risk for wind here. And that's the reason why, well, you'll actually see the reason why here, but there's going to be a long band of storms that'll form after the discrete supercells, which the discrete supercells could produce tornadoes. And we'll talk about the areas that could be impacted here in a bit, but a much larger risk for wind here into Thursday. A massive 30% has been issued for the areas that I called out for that was in the enhanced risk. You also have the significant severe risk here, or your hatch risk in this black circle with dotted lines. That is a 10% chance or greater probability of seeing hurricane force winds or 74 mile per hour winds or greater within 25 miles of a point. You also have your tornado risk here, 2% indicated in green, 5% indicated in brown, and 10% indicated in yellow. And so whatever chance you have, whatever probability you have, that is your chance of seeing tornadoes within 25 miles of a point. Would not be surprised if they sig this risk to make it to where there is a additional 10% chance or greater probability of seeing tornadoes stronger than EF1. So tornadoes stronger than 110 miles per hour. So definitely something to consider with that. All right, let's take a look at the simulated reflectivity here. The HRRR is the same model that we're going to be using for tomorrow's event. And so if you guys live within any of these areas and you want to see what the time is, look up to the top right-hand corner and you'll be able to see as to what will most likely unfold for you all. Now, the main reason as to why eastern Missouri into western or southwestern parts of Illinois is in this risk is mainly because of what's going to happen in the morning. You're going to basically have the scattered convection that occurred earlier on in the morning towards Kansas City that'll be moving on through in your area, so you guys could have a pretty strong wind risk. But then at around 1 p.m. Central Daylight Time, you start to get a supercell that starts to form here in northern Oklahoma. And then you have more. Storms that even form on through. And actually, the models have been pretty consistent with a supercell forming here along the border of Kansas or Oklahoma. Actually, a little bit further south of that border, but somewhere along I-35. That is right around where the supercell most likely will form. Whether or not that translates to what actually happens is still to be determined, but the models have been picking up on a supercell that forms on through here, and that's definitely something that we're going to want to watch out for as this continues to move on through. You still have some showers and thunderstorms that move on towards the St. Louis metro area at around 3 p.m. Central Daylight Time, and that's when stuff really starts to kind of push on through as a first wave. And then here is the second wave. You can see massive line of storms that start to form behind the supercells that form in Oklahoma. There could be some cells that form in Kansas as well as Missouri. but if you live in any of these areas, you could definitely see some discrete cells with some embedded tornadoes as well. I actually wouldn't put it past it for the potential of that. But then as this heads towards the evening hours, even into the overnight hours, you can see how we actually have a broken line QLCS, more or less, or a quasi-linear convective system, which means a long line of storms, more or less. It's a fancy word for a long line of storms, but we have a pretty interesting broken line QLCS that moves on through, and this could create some significant wind damage, as well as some embedded tornadoes within the line with some discrete supercells that move on through. And that's another reason as to why there's a risk for some significant wind across portions of St. Louis. So if you guys live over in Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, St. Louis, that general vicinity, as well as northwestern Arkansas, you guys could potentially see some significant wind. As I said, large hail in upwards of 2 inches, maybe even larger than that, as well as the chance for some tornadoes, some of which could be significant. Dew points. You can see here across the board, you have a lot of these yellows, which indicate 60-degree dew points and above, and that is favorable for severe weather right there. You even have some in these oranges, which indicate 70s, and that is really favorable for severe weather. You have a lot of strong moisture that is basically feeding this event, and so definitely something that we're going to have to watch out for as this continues to progress on through. Our convective available potential energy, or CAPE numbers, which basically measures our warm air rising and cold air sinking in the atmosphere. The displacement between the two can indicate how much energy there is in the atmosphere for thunderstorms to either form or sustain. And so if we have over 2,000 joules per kilogram CAPE in the atmosphere, that is good enough for severe weather. And that would be indicated in much of these yellows. And you can see that there's actually some stuff that are even into the red and purple, and that could indicate an upwards of 3,000, even 4,000 joules per kilogram CAPE as well. So definitely something to be mindful as that moves on through. We also have this little blob here in northern Oklahoma, and this is actually from the supercell that forms. And so all the more reason to be mindful in northern Oklahoma. As I said, most of the moisture and most of the energy, if it does go to a supercell earlier on, that could produce your long track tornado that moves on through, potentially violent as well. And we'll have to watch out for this as this moves on through. Most likely we'll be live streaming this. As a matter of fact, it has a 10% chance for a tornado, so you can almost guarantee that I probably will. But still something to monitor as this moves on through later on Thursday. Now, from a wind shear perspective, we have a lot of southerlies to almost southwesterlies here in Oklahoma. This starts to turn into a southwesterly here in Kansas and Missouri. You have your surface, or not really your surface low pressure, but your mid-level low pressure here that moves on through into Iowa. So that's really what's stirring this event. And so it's a pretty strong wind shear here, and upwards of 20 to even 30 knots in some spots here in Kansas and Missouri. But 20 knots is pretty much what's it here in Oklahoma. And so some decent low-level winds here at 1 kilometer above ground level. Now, if we take a look at our 700 millibar wind shear, the winds veer rather rapidly, and they get rather intense here. You can see how the winds here in Kansas and Oklahoma, as well as Missouri, almost are due west. So we have a bunch of westerly winds here, and this does indicate some strong veering in the atmosphere, which does amplify the chance for tornadoes. Supercells capable of producing tornadoes. And we have some wind shear in upwards of almost 50 knots in some spots. That is very strong for 3 kilometers above ground level. And so definitely something to be mindful of as this moves on through. We have some wind shear that could be favorable for producing tornadoes. Now let's take a look at soundings. As I said, favorite thing for people to look at. And if you guys want to take a look at how to, just a quick basis as to how to dissect soundings, I put a timestamp earlier on in this video discussing as to how you can look at them. This was talking about the event prior on Wednesday. And so if you want to go through the time of watching that, feel free to do so, because I'm not really going to explain it again. It takes too much time. But here we can see our hodograph does curl off to the right. We do have some strong veering with height. Well, not exactly strong, but we do have veering with height, which does indicate the threat for tornadoes to be possible. and that does check out in my opinion. This does tell me that it's going to be long track, but high precipitation based off of the upper levels of the atmosphere and how close it is to the storm motion origin, as well as how it moves into its supercell more or less. But yeah, long track supercell here that could potentially produce tornadoes here in southeastern Kansas. We also have a plethora amount of energy here. Actually, CAPE amounts in upwards of 4,500 joules per kilogram. Not a lot of a limiting factor. Your LCL is kind of close to the ground, so not that large distance for a storm to travel, more or less, or at least not a storm, but a tornado to travel to the ground. And so that does check out in my opinion. This isn't half bad of a tornado sounding. Even though it says marginal torr, I feel like it should at least be a torr sounding, more or less. Now if we take a look at the next frame over here, we can see that this was in western Missouri, so this will be along the line of storms that start to move on through. And same thing here, except a stronger hodograph that veers off to the right. So we have pretty strong sounding here, to say the least. Ventilation is good, so this will most likely be low precipitation based if you do have supercells that form within the line. So that is good for that. We do have a little bit of contamination, so we do have to be mindful of that it could impact thermodynamics just slightly. But we do have CAPE amounts over 2,500 joules per kilogram at minimum, and that is indicative of some severe weather here in western Missouri. LCL is pretty low to the ground, so that does tell me that there could be the chance for tornadoes here as well. And then we also have our last sounding here, which will be in southeast Kansas again later on in the evening, as well as northern Oklahoma. And the wind shear does amplify here at the lower levels, which means that things could get rather tornadic rather quickly, and things could really ramp up more or less. And so this does veer off to the right. We do still have the wind shear in the upper levels that kind of suck. So this could mean that not only could this be high precipitation based, but this could also veer off to the left as well, go into all sorts of different wonky directions. And so the National Weather Service will probably have to have their guard up as to storm motion, as well as tornadoes that could potentially veer out of the polygon more or less. We do have a plethora amount of CAPE here. 4,000 joules per kilogram CAPE is what I see here. Dew points are pretty high as well, and some pretty strong damaging wind gusts as well, regardless if there is tornadoes or not. But still, pretty strong energy, pretty strong wind shear or surface vorticity, more or less. And so we definitely have something to watch out for as this continues to move on through. All right, last thing here is a thank you to all of our channel members. These sponsors have been helping out my channel for better part of about a month, maybe even a month and a half for some of these. There's even some people that have stayed for as much as 7 to 8 months. And so to all these people here, I greatly appreciate them being a channel member. They get exclusive perks and stuff like that. There's actually bloopers of a video that I did the other day, and I posted that for them. They enjoyed that. So if you want to see exclusive content, if you want to have exclusive emotes and badges for whenever I live stream, feel free to become a channel member. Link is in the description down below. That is going to be it for me. My name is Nate. I also go by HockeyBoy Nate. If you haven't already, please be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on notifications, share this with friends and family and on social media. Follow me on social media. Join my Discord server. I will see you all later tonight whenever I live stream. So peace out, everyone.